and they shechted 40 animals. And they only took 4 because they were only taking the real glot. And the real glot cows in America are like 10%. That's it. If they're selling you 40, 50% glot, it's really not. But they only took the real glot cows. And I asked him, Gabriel, how much more does it cost to produce these 4 animals than the price of treif? And he said 50 cents a pound. Taking into consideration the Rav, the shlachtois, the shoichet, the wholesaler of the kosher meat, 50 cents a pound is the only difference in cost at that level between kosher and treif. And yet, everyone is out to get the big bucks and the big cheat. So, okay, now, I will tell you a story from when I was younger and my kids were really young. We used to go on hikes and barbecues, and we had hot dogs, which we thought were kosher hot dogs, and I wouldn't recommend them to you today. And you put the hot dogs on the grill, and you're playing frisbee, or you're walking around, or whatever you're doing, and you're not keeping your eye on the meat all the time. There's a halacha, which we will get to very shortly, called basar shenis alim min ha'ayin, which actually in the list of things I should have told you about before. We read the Gemara about chavis and champag, the things that needs chosamos, and there's a concept of basar, which is hidden from the eye. And basar, which is hidden from the eye, is not kosher to use anymore. So if we would be wandering around while the meat is on the barbecue, out in the open, can't eat it anymore. So I took my knife and I carved the word kosher into the pieces, into the hot dogs. And you could clearly see it as the hot dog barbecued more. You could see it more. And this is 30 years later, and my kids remember that very clearly. A tremendous chinuch lesson. And my kids, believe me, know all about chosamos. So what constitutes a chasima or a siman? Something which is clear that it is the way it was made. The Gemara and the Shulchan Aruch talk about one Hebrew letter being one chosam and two Hebrew letters being a second chosam. And then they say, but what if there are Yisrael Mumar, a Jew who's not religious, or worse, chas v'shalom, or a goy who knows how to read or write? Then that's not called a chosam. What about diffus? If the goyim have diffus, printing, then printing is not a chosam. In Los Angeles, there was a hechsher, hechsher is still there. They started to make chalav Yisrael milk. And chalav Yisrael milk, the din in the Gemara is that it's also to drink chalav shecholvo akum, milk which was milked by a goy, ve'en Yisrael ro'ehu, and the Jew didn't see the milking. And I'm sure you're aware, perhaps not, maybe I shouldn't even tell you, but Rav Moshe Feinstein Zeich Livracha said that under certain circumstances, you're allowed to use what he called chalav ha-companies, the milk of the big companies. And even though I'm a little nothing, and Rav Moshe Feinstein was the Gadol Hador, I am ready and willing to say, and I didn't get a job once because I said it, in this area Rav Moshe made a mistake. But that's really not our issue. Assume for a minute you must have only chalav Yisrael, you must have chosamos on it, right? And the people who are paying the extra bucks for the chalav Yisrael are doing because they think you're supposed to do that. And what was his siman of his milk? Because he did it in a regular dairy. He koshered the equipment, had watched the milking of the cows, and they put it into bottles. So what was the siman that this is the chalav Yisrael? The date was upside down. Well, hello, the date upside down is not a siman, it is not a chosam. So we used powdered chalav Yisrael milk, not powdered stam milk, which some rabbanim allow, and that's again based on a false assumption that you can't make powdered milk out of a chalav of a behemoth tamea. Let me tell you, you can buy powdered horse milk all over Europe, and at least a few years ago there was talk of making a powdered horse milk factory in St. Louis, Missouri. So you definitely can make powdered milk out of davar tameh, and so we used chalav Yisrael powdered milk instead of using this thing that had the date turned upside down, except the one time that I went out to the milking myself. So that's not a siman. If you print it, okay, 2 war stories. One is the story of the season kosher Pesach mashgiach tamidi sardines, and people opened them up and they found octopus. And my friend called up the OU, how could it be, you have octopus in the kosher Pesach mashgiach tmidi sardines. They said, well, we really do have a mashgiach tmidi at the factory. And these sardines were not produced at our factory. They were produced somewhere else, and somebody just brought them there and put the labels on. Well, it means that the mashgiach did not have control of the labels, and it means those labels are worthless. Worthless, zero, nothing. Okay? Now, a second story is the NCSY convention. For those who don't know, NCSY is a kiruv organization, and they have Shabbatonim to bring people close to Yiddishkeit, and they had one in Florida, and they served Heinz vegetarian beans, and some of the Baalei Teshuva said, I didn't think they would be serving me this here, because there was pork in the vegetarian beans. And how did it happen? Because there was a Heinz factory that the OU did not know existed. So, if the mashgiach does not control the apparatus of putting on the simanim, as far as I'm concerned, those are not chotamot. Many years ago, I guess either before or in the beginning of World War II, or the United States entry into World War II, they made a cherem in New York that it's asur to eat a chicken that does not have a plumba, meaning a metal seal, which is usually placed on the wing of the bird. There was a tzaddik, I'm not 100% sure whether the tzaddik is still alive and he's a shlita, or he has gone on and is a zeichet tzaddik levacha. We will hope that he's a shlita and wish him many happy years. A fine yeke, and you can understand he's a yeke from the story. He was drafted into the army, and so therefore he quickly learned shechita, so he'd be able to have a little bit of chicken here and there. And what he did is he shechted the chicken, and he put the plumba on, and then he removed the plumba and koshered the chicken and ate it. Because as a cherem, you can't have a chicken without a plumba, even though he shechted it, even though it never left his hands. A cherem is a cherem, and he made sure that there was a plumba on the chicken. The opposite end, a person named Seymour Weiss owned a slaughterhouse in Pittsburgh. It was later taken by the IRS. And he shechted animals. He didn't, but the shochet shechted animals there. And he told me that one time he wanted to buy chicken, so he went to his friend who had a chicken slaughterhouse, and the friend reached into his pocket and pulled out a handful of these plumbas of all different kinds of hechsherim and said, what kind of plumba do you want on your chicken? So, in other words, the owner of the slaughterhouse, who was not the Rav, not the shochet, not even so he had as many of whatever kind of plumbas as he wanted. Problematic. In Israel, there's something called the plumba law. The manufacturer is not allowed to deliver plumbas or stamps with kashrus claims on them, except to the person named, or the organization, an official representative. If they do, they're violating the law. And you know that nobody would ever violate the law, so that's perfectly under control. Some more war stories. My wife was giving birth to my first child. He was a cesarean section candidate, and she was in labor starting Shabbos morning until Sunday night. And she was in Jacobi Hospital because it was premature. She would have been in Einstein Hospital where everything is supposed to be kosher. Jacobi is a city hospital where everything is far from kosher. And they brought her a tray of stuff, gelatin, and who knows what, liquid diet. So we said she can only eat kosher. So they took the tray away. And 10 minutes later, they brought back the same exact tray with the same exact items and a little piece of paper on it where it said, kosher liquid diet. Thank you. So, that's another thing that's worthless. Now, I am not in the kashrus business. Very seldom have I been in the kashrus business. Those cases where I have given out something under my name with my achrayas, I personally signed every single package. It's a difficult thing to do in a major concern, but for sure, the labels may not be under the control of the factory and the Mechalei Shabbos. Now let's talk for a moment about ne'emanus, or ne'emanut, trustworthiness. The Shulchan Aruch Yordea, Kuf, Yud-Tes 119, talks about a person who's chashud l'davar. We're talking about a Shomer Shabbos Jew who eats kosher, but let's just say he eats Chodesh Chutz La'aretz. And again, Chodesh Chutz La'aretz is a whole nother shi'ur. But on a very simple level, understand that the Pashtus of the Gemara, it's treif. The Rosh, the Rif, the Rambam, it's treif. Rav Yosef Kara, the Mechaber, it's treif. The Ramah, it's treif. The Or Zarah, you might have a little way out. Now we have a big scale, right? We're coming up to Yom Kippur. On one side of the scale, we've got the Rosh, the Rif, and the Rambam, and the Mechaber, and the Ramah. On the other hand, we have the Or Zarah. All of a sudden, it's kosher. Okay. Chodesh Chutz La'aretz, when you plant grain, you're not allowed to harvest it, and you are not allowed to eat it until the bringing of the Omer on the second day of Pesach. May we speedily build the Beis HaMikdash and bring the Omer. If there is no Beis HaMikdash, if there's no Omer brought, then Min HaTorah, the morning of the 16th day of Nisan is Matir, and Midrabanan, Yom HaNeif Kulo Asur, it's not mutter until the night. Why? Shema Mehera Yibana Beis HaMikdash, may it be His will soon. Maybe the Mikdash will be speedily built. And this is where Rashi says, when is it going to be built? If it was built Erev Pesach, so they would have already brought the Omer. You can't build the Beis HaMikdash on Yontif. You can't build it on Motzei Yontif. So then if they built it in the morning, then why didn't they makriv? So he says, it must be that it's coming down from Min HaShamayim already built. He doesn't say it has to. Because in Yechezkel, Sefer Yechezkel, he says, why does Yechezkel give us all these measurements of how to build the Beis HaMikdash? So that we'll know how to build the Beis HaMikdash. Well, if you have to know how to build the Beis HaMikdash, Vaistois, it seems to me that you have to build the Beis HaMikdash. But that's again a whole nother shmuas, right? So we won't get into that issue because it's very controversial. Okay. Now, we have a theory which is behind almost all of the hechsherim that you know and love, called Yotzei v'Nechnas. Now we have a Yotzei, soon we'll have a Nechnas. A Yotzei v'Nechnas means the Mashgiach is not there all the time. And the owner of the factory is a Machal Shabbos. And the fact that the Mashgiach comes occasionally, we hope more often than not, we call that Yotzei v'Nechnas. And for some things it's good, and for some things it's not good, and you have to understand under what circumstances it is good. But almost all of the hechsherim depend on this concept. And the concept depends on the idea that the factory is doing the same thing all the time. So that any time the mashgiach comes, day or night, he's going to see the same thing. And that's how you can do it. Because you assume that just like they're doing this now, they're doing this yesterday, and they're doing it tomorrow, and any moment they can expect me to arrive, and therefore they're afraid to mishanet, to cheat, and so on. And so I have this, I can give my hechsher. I was very briefly a mashgiach. Now you could understand why after 10 minutes the Rav Machshir would want to fire me, but in fact I quit. And I was a representative, and we will name names here, of the Chaf K in Los Angeles. And I had 5 things that I was supposed to examine. One of them was called C&C Cola. Now in those days, people drank soft drinks without a hechsher. That's a fact. And so to have a hechsher already on a soft drink, that was already a big milah. I drove up to the C&C Cola plant. I went into the office and I said, I'm here to inspect the plant. They said, you don't have an appointment, you can't come in. That means that there's no Yotzei v'Nichnas. That means there's no mirtas. It means that it doesn't matter whose name is on the bottle, it has no hechsher. Nekuda. That was the C&C Cola. L'tovasam, there was a place that made maraschino cherries, and I drove up to the maraschino cherry place, and they welcomed me in, and they showed me everything, and I examined everything, and there were no problems. Okay. The third place made bakery ingredients. That is to say, a bakery would buy from them to put into their breads and cakes and so on and so forth. And they had 2 plants. One was the wet plant and one was the dry plant. And I came to the wet plant, and the balabas is the only guy there. And nothing whatsoever is happening. The vats are empty, the pipes are empty, there's nothing. I said, what do you do here? He said, when we get an order, the tanker drives up, he connects his hose to this pipe over here, the stuff runs through, it comes out over there, and that's what we do when it happens. But nothing was happening. So, I mean, what shall I tell you? So I